The screech of tires. The smell of burnt rubber. Karen's metallic blue SUV doesn't slow down, it accelerates. Straight toward the pool fence. Straight toward the splash party. Straight toward the point of no return. And then it happens. The splash that changes everything. But as the water settles and the screaming stops, someone realizes this was no accident. This was intentional, and everyone knows why. The October sun beat down on Maple Street with the kind of relentless heat that made the asphalt shimmer. Karen sat in her driveway, gripping the steering wheel of her Range Rover so hard her knuckles had turned white. Through the windshield, she could see them. The entire neighborhood assembled around the Hendersons' pool like it was some kind of social coronation. The Hendersons, the Johnsons, the Patels, even that smug couple from the corner who'd never once invited them to anything. Her husband, Derek, stood in the pool area. With them, laughing at something someone said. Karen had watched through her kitchen window for the past 20 minutes as he transformed into this version of himself, the relaxed Derek. The Derek who didn't come home stressed about mortgage payments and layoffs. The Derek who clearly preferred these people to his own wife. The invitation had come 2 days ago. An email to the neighborhood group chat. Splash party! 2 p.m. Saturday. Casual. Families welcome. Except they both knew what that meant. Karen had shown up at 1:55 p.m. with their daughter, Sophie, already in her swimsuit, already excited. The gate had been locked. The side entrance, too. By the time they'd found another way around, the party was in full swing, and every pool lounger was taken. Every conversation had stopped mid-sentence when they arrived. Lisa Henderson had smiled that smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes.
"Oh, Karen.
We weren't sure you got the email. The gate's usually left open earlier, but we had to keep it locked because of, well, you understand. Insurance stuff. Insurance stuff. Code for, we don't want you here. But Derek had gone in without Sophie. Just waded into the water with his work polo shirt folded neatly on a chair, leaving his wife and daughter standing at the edge like outsiders at their own neighborhood. Sophie had started crying within 5 minutes. Not the loud, demanding cry of a tired child, but the quiet, broken cry of someone who'd just realized she wasn't wanted. Karen had driven home with Sophie silent in the back seat, staring out the window. She'd put her daughter down for an early nap, made sure the door was locked, and gone back to the car. Now, sitting in her driveway, Karen felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, she knew anger well enough. This was something else. This was the moment everything crystallized. All the birthday parties Sophie wasn't invited to. All the coffee meetups she'd found out about through Instagram photos, hours after they'd happened. All the times Derek had defended them, said she was being paranoid, said people just naturally gravitated toward different friends. All the times she'd made herself smaller, quieter, less threatening, her phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Staying a bit longer. Might grab dinner with the guys. Don't wait up. Karen stared at the words. She looked at the clock on the dashboard, 2:47 p.m. She turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled to life, powerful and responsive. Karen had always loved this car, the weight of it, the sense of control. She pulled out of the driveway slowly, deliberately. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't crying. She was moving through the world, with the clarity of someone who'd finally made a decision. It took exactly 4 minutes to drive to Willow, lane where the Hendersons lived. The pool area was visible from the street, that sprawling backyard with its infinity edge and the expensive outdoor kitchen that Lisa had shown photos of at the Homeowners Association meeting last month. Karen could see the crowd. Could see Derek in the shallow end, his arm around some woman's shoulders. Was that Janet? Janet from accounting? Both of them laughing at something. Karen had always been good at driving. Perfect parallel parking. Defensive driving certificate. Never a ticket in 20 years. She knew exactly how to handle her vehicle. She turned the wheel. The car accelerated smoothly off the street, directly toward the fence line. Behind her, someone shouted. The sound was distant, unimportant. Everything had narrowed to this single moment. The moment where all the accumulated weight of all the rejections, All the exclusions, all the small cruelties that people pretended weren't cruelties, finally had a shape, finally had a direction. The fence was cheap composite material, probably regulation height, probably designed to look nice but not actually withstand much force. The car hit it at exactly 32 miles per hour, fast enough to matter, slow enough that no one would get hurt. The fence exploded. Sections of it flew into the pool area like shattered dreams. The car's hood crossed the threshold. The front bumper touched the deck. Karen slammed on the brakes. The world stopped. For a moment, one perfect, crystalline moment, there was absolute silence. Everyone was frozen. Derek was in the water, frozen mid-motion. Lisa Henderson stood frozen near the grill, her hand still raised in whatever gesture she'd been making. Then the screaming started, but Karen didn't hear it. She was looking at Derek's face. At the exact moment, his shock transformed into recognition, into understanding, into the dawning realization that his wife had just crashed her car into the neighborhood pool party, that her daughters. Tears had mattered more than his comfort. That. Karen had finally stopped being small, and as the chaos erupted. Around her, people shouting, phones appearing, Lisa Henderson's face turning that satisfying shade of purple, Karen turned off the engine. She grabbed her purse from the passenger seat, opened the car door, and stepped out onto the deck. Only then did she smile. "Oh," she said to Derek, who was wading frantically toward the edge. "I'm so sorry. My foot must have slipped." The police arrived in 8 minutes. Karen watched from the Hendersons' kitchen, where she'd calmly walked after stepping out of the car, Lisa's protests dying in her throat, as the officers cordoned off the area with yellow tape. The pool had turned murky, leaves and debris floating across its surface. The fence lay in splinters. Derek stood dripping wet on the lawn, wrapped in someone's beach towel, gesturing frantically at the officers. His voice carried through the open sliding glass doors. "She did it on purpose. She absolutely did it on purpose. My wife, she was angry because we—" He caught himself, glancing back at the house where Karen stood visible through the window. He lowered his voice, but not enough. "She wasn't invited to the party. She took it the wrong way." Karen sipped the glass of water she'd poured from Lisa's refrigerator without asking. "Took it the wrong way," as if exclusion was a matter of interpretation, as if her daughter's tears were an overreaction. Officer Marcus Chen was the first through the door, his partner, a younger woman named Rodriguez, trailing behind him. Chen's eyes moved from the destroyed fence to the car to Karen's composed figure in the kitchen. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us," he said carefully. "Not quite an arrest, but something close. We need to get a statement about what happened." "Of course," Karen said. She set down the water glass. "But I should tell you something first. My daughter is home alone. She's 7. I need to call someone to pick her up before we do anything else." Rodriguez's expression shifted. Chen's jaw tightened. "How long has she been alone?" Rodriguez asked. "About 40 minutes, since we got home from trying to attend this party. I needed air. I didn't think I'd be gone long. It was a calculated lie wrapped in enough truth to be believable." Derek's voice from outside grew louder. He was telling someone about the party invitation, about how Karen had overreacted, how she'd always been unstable about social things. Karen called her sister Michelle. She picked up on the second ring. "I need you to go to my house. Pick up Sophie. Tell her Mommy had to run an errand. Can you do that?" "Karen, what's please? Just do it. I'll explain later." She hung up before Michelle could ask more questions. Officer Chen was watching her carefully, as if trying to determine whether she was the victim or the villain of this story. Karen understood that the answer probably wasn't simple. The ride to the police station was quiet. The back of the patrol car smelled like plastic and old coffee. Through the window, Karen watched the neighborhood pass, the manicured lawns, the expensive cars and driveways, the carefully curated lives displayed like products in a store window. She'd tried so hard to fit into this place, had attended every community board meeting, every charity fundraiser, had smiled at every slight. At the station, they put her in an interrogation room that was smaller than she expected and colder. Detective Sarah Mullins arrived about an hour later, carrying a manila folder. and wearing the expression of someone who'd already made up her mind. "So," Mullins said, sitting across from her, "you drove your car through a fence into a residential pool party." "I did." "Where your husband was present?" "Yes." "Where your husband was, in fact, socializing with people who hadn't invited you?" Karen met her eyes. "Where my husband was socializing with people who locked the gate specifically so my daughter and I couldn't enter." Mullins opened the folder. "Photos from the scene? The destroyed fence, the car half on the deck. We've got 3 independent witnesses saying you accelerated deliberately. That this wasn't an accident." "I didn't say it was an accident." That got Mullins's attention. The detective leaned back in her chair, studying Karen with new interest. "You're not denying it?" "No. I drove through that fence, deliberately, at a speed that I calculated would cause property damage but not injure anyone." "And why would you do that?" Karen thought about how to answer this. About Sophie's face when she realized they weren't welcome. About Derek's arm around Janet. About Lisa's smile. About all the small moments that had accumulated into this one large, irrevocable moment. "Because," Karen said quietly, "I was tired of being invisible in my own neighborhood. I was tired of my daughter being treated like she didn't matter. I was tired of my husband choosing them over his own family. And I was tired of being too polite about it." Mullins was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a note in her file. "The Hendersons aren't pressing charges," she said. "Homeowners insurance covers the fence and there was no injury to persons. But you're looking at a reckless endangerment charge at minimum. Possibly felony misdirected vehicle operation depending on how the DA feels." Karen nodded. She'd known this was coming. "Your husband, however," Mullins continued, "has a different problem. One of the guests at the party was Lisa Henderson's attorney. Apparently what he's been telling people about you being unstable and overreacting about your exclusion from neighborhood events might constitute defamation. She's considering legal action. And that insurance stuff about the gate? The guest who's a lawyer says that's a liability nightmare, admitting they deliberately excluded you to avoid insurance claims." Karen felt something shift in her chest. Not victory. She was too aware of what was coming for her to feel victorious. But something like balance. "There's also the matter of your husband's employment," Mullins added. "Mr. Henderson is Derek's direct supervisor at his firm. And apparently there are HR concerns about Derek engaging in workplace relationships with colleagues while married." It took Karen a moment to process this. Derek wasn't just embarrassed. He wasn't just angry. He was facing actual consequences. The kind that didn't dissolve with an apology or a well-timed explanation. "My advice?" Mullins said, standing up. "Get a lawyer. A good one. And maybe get one for the custody situation, too. Because when your husband's faced with all this, he's going to look for someone to blame. And that someone is probably not going to be himself." Michelle was waiting in the station's lobby when they released Karen. Her sister pulled her into a hug that felt like catching fire, fierce and all-consuming and necessary. "Sophie's at home," Michelle said. "She's asleep." "Karen, what the hell happened out there?" "I burned it all down," Karen said simply. "I finally burned it all down." That night, after Michelle left and Sophie was safely tucked in bed, Karen sat in her living room and watched her phone light up with messages. Derek wasn't coming home. He'd apparently gone to stay at a hotel. Friends and acquaintances were sending carefully worded texts asking if she was okay, if she needed anything. The kind of texts that really meant we're taking sides and we've chosen. One message came from an unknown number. "You're a psychotic bitch and you've ruined Derek's life." Lisa Henderson, Karen read it twice, then blocked the number. She thought about tomorrow. About the lawyer she'd need to hire. About the court dates and the custody battles and the financial reckoning that was coming. About explaining to Sophie why Daddy wasn't coming home. About all the ways this one moment of clarity was going to complicate her life. But when she thought about Derek's face in the water, about the moment he realized that his wife had finally stopped being convenient, about the understanding in his eyes that she was no longer a problem to be managed, but a force to be reckoned with, Karen didn't regret a single second of it. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her lawyer, recommended by Michelle. "Got your case. We need to talk strategy. This could go several directions, and some of them are actually in your favor." The custody hearing was scheduled for November 14th. Karen sat in her lawyer's office, a woman named Patricia Okonkwo, who had a reputation for taking no prisoners, going over the timeline of events from the past 3 weeks. Derek said, "Filing for full custody," Patricia said flatly, sliding a document across the desk. "He's claiming you're mentally unstable, that you deliberately endangered a child by leaving Sophie alone while you committed a crime, and that the incident itself demonstrates poor judgment, unfit for primary guardianship." Karen's hands trembled slightly as she read. The language was clinical, designed to make her sound dangerous. But embedded in Derek's narrative was the truth he was trying to hide. He'd chosen a party over his daughter. "He's also claiming the car incident was motivated by jealousy," Patricia continued. "That you were upset about his social connections and acted impulsively. He's had his therapist write a letter, convenient timing, by the way, stating that you've always shown signs of emotional dysregulation and unstable attachment patterns." "I've never been to therapy with Derek," Karen said. "Doesn't matter. He's allowed to reinterpret your marriage through whatever lens helps his case." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "But here's where it gets interesting. The HR investigation at Derek's firm is moving faster than I expected. Apparently, Janet Morrison, the woman he was arm wrestling with in the pool, filed her own complaint. She says Derek's been pressuring her for a relationship, implying his marriage was over, and when she declined his advances, he became hostile." Karen felt her stomach drop and rise simultaneously. Derek had been pursuing someone else. While she was at home with Sophie, while he was at that pool party, while he was sending her "don't wait up" texts, he'd been actively trying to start an affair. "There's more," Patricia said. Janet also provided emails. "Derek's been telling people at work that you're emotionally abusive, that you isolate him from friends, when that he's trapped in a marriage with an unstable woman. He's been building a narrative. The car incident played right into it, unfortunately, so he looks like a victim," Karen said. "Exactly. The narrative is, poor Derek, stuck with a jealous, unstable wife who's now facing criminal charges, so he's trying to protect their daughter." Patricia pulled out another file. "However, we have ammunition too." She spread out a series of bank statements and credit card receipts. "Derek's been taking money from your joint savings. Not huge amounts, but consistent. Hotel rooms, rental cars, restaurant charges at places you've never been. There's also his search history. The firm's IT department had to pull it for the HR investigation. Derek's been looking at apartments, custody lawyers, how to hide assets in a divorce." Karen stared at the evidence of her husband's betrayal. It was one thing to suspect infidelity, to know he'd chosen that party over her. It was another to see it documented, itemized, undeniable. "He was planning to leave," Karen whispered. "He was planning to leave and take your daughter," Patricia corrected. "Based on these searches, he was going to file for divorce, claim you were unfit, and position himself as the wronged party. Your car stunt actually disrupted his timeline. Now he's rushing, making mistakes, getting sloppy." That afternoon, Karen picked up Sophie from school. Her daughter had been clingy since Derek left, asking repeatedly if Mommy was going to jail, if Daddy was coming back, if it was her fault somehow. Each question felt like a small knife. "No, sweetheart," Karen said, strapping her into the car seat. "Daddy and Mommy are just taking some time apart. This isn't about you. This isn't your fault." "Is it because of the fence?" Sophie asked, her 7-year-old logic cutting straight through to the heart of things. "The fence?" Karen glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You crashed the car because I cried, because they didn't want me at the pool." Sophie's voice was small, guilty. "If I hadn't cried, you wouldn't have crashed the car and Daddy would still be here." Karen's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She pulled over into a parking lot and turned around to face her daughter properly. "Sophie, listen to me. What happened is not your fault. Not one bit. You know what your crying showed me? That you were hurt. And you know what that meant? That the people at that party were being mean. That it wasn't okay. You were right to cry. And I was right to be angry about it." "But the fence?" "The fence needed to come down anyway," Karen said, and meant it. Sometimes things that look pretty on the outside, like fences, like friendships, like neighborhoods, are actually keeping out people who matter. And sometimes you have to break them to prove they were never meant to keep good people out in the first place. Sophie considered this solemnly, then leaned forward and hugged her mother. That night, Derek called. Karen almost didn't answer, but Patricia had advised her to document everything. "I'm coming by tomorrow to pick up some clothes," Derek said without preamble. "I need you to make sure Sophie is at school." "Why?" Karen's voice was steady. "Because I don't want to see you, and I don't want Sophie upset by whatever custody arrangement we're negotiating." "You can see Sophie," Karen said carefully. "You're her father, but you're going to do it during scheduled visitation, and it's not going to be at 9 in the morning on a school day. You don't get to make those decisions anymore." "My lawyer says—" "Your lawyer says what?" Karen interrupted. "That you can dictate when you see your daughter? That you can show up whenever it's convenient for you? Derek, you walked out. You chose to stay at a hotel instead of fighting for your marriage or fighting for your daughter. So we're not doing things your way anymore." There was silence on the other end. Then Derek's voice came back, harder now, with an edge of something ugly. "You crashed a car into a neighborhood pool, Karen. You left our daughter alone. You're going to lose her. My lawyer is confident the court will see that you're unstable and dangerous." Karen felt fear spike through her, hot and sharp. Then she thought about what Patricia had shown her, about Derek's searches, about his affairs, about his carefully constructed narrative designed to isolate her before he left. "You're right," Karen said quietly. "The court will hear all of that. They'll also hear about how you deliberately locked the gate to keep Sophie out, how you told people at work that I isolate you, how you've been having affairs and planning to take our daughter away from me, how you've been stealing from our joint savings. And they'll hear from Sophie about how you chose a pool party over her tears. You can't prove any of that." "I don't have to," Karen said. "My lawyer already has." She hung up. The next morning, Derek came by with a police escort. He'd called non-emergency to have an officer present, apparently worried Karen might do something. The officer, a bored-looking woman named Patterson, stood in the hallway while Derek grabbed a duffel bag of clothes. But something was different about him now. Without his carefully constructed facade, without the comfort of his neighborhood friends and his affair and his planning, Derek looked smaller, tired, like a man who'd finally realized his own story wasn't going to end the way he'd written it. "I'm filing for full custody," he said as he packed. "Go ahead," Karen replied. "My lawyer is ready." He left without another word. That evening, Michelle came over with wine and Chinese food. She sat with Karen on the couch while Sophie watched a movie in the other room. "How are you holding up?" Michelle asked. "I'm terrified," Karen admitted. "I have criminal charges pending. I'm facing a custody battle. My marriage is over. I destroyed a fence. I should be falling apart, but you're not." "No," Karen said. "I'm not, because for the first time in years, I'm not trying to disappear. I'm not trying to be smaller or quieter or more acceptable. I did something explosive and destructive, and yeah, I'm paying for it. But I'm not paying for it by pretending I was wrong to be angry." Michelle squeezed her hand. "The neighborhood's turning on Derek," Michelle said. "Did you hear? Janet filed a sexual harassment complaint. Lisa Henderson's being questioned about the insurance stuff and the gate. And Derek's firm is doing a full investigation into his conduct. Apparently he's not the first person he's tried to pressure." Karen hadn't heard. She felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness at that news. "He's going to lose his job," Michelle continued, "and probably his reputation. Your fence cost him more than it cost the Hendersons?" Karen thought about Derek's face in the water, about the moment everything changed, about how one act of deliberate destruction had somehow created space for everything else to crumble. Not the family, but the lies holding it together. "I just want Sophie to be okay," Karen said. "That's all that matters." "She will be," Michelle said, "because her mother finally showed her that sometimes the price of being yourself is worth paying." 3 days later, an email arrived in Karen's inbox. It was from a woman named Rachel Chen, someone Karen had never met. The subject line read, "Thank you for what you did." Karen opened it cautiously. "I live 3 houses down from the Hendersons. I've been trying to get involved in the neighborhood for 2 years, and they've been systematically keeping me out. It started exactly like what happened to you. Locked gates, exclusive parties, casual comments about different crowds. I watched what you did, and I realized you were right. You did burn it down. But in burning it down, you made it impossible for them to keep doing it to anyone else. So thank you. My daughter got invited to the community center Halloween party this year, and for the first time it felt genuine. Karen read the email 3 times. She forwarded it to Patricia with a note. Send this to the DA and to the custody mediator. Then she sat with Sophie, who was drawing pictures of a rainbow after a storm, and for the first time since the fence came down, Karen allowed herself to smile without guilt. The damage wasn't just destruction. Sometimes destruction was the only language people understood. The DA's office called Patricia on a Tuesday morning in late November. By noon, Karen had her answer. The reckless endangerment charge was being dropped. In exchange for a guilty plea to property damage and a $15,000 restitution payment to the Hendersons, the misdemeanor would stay on her record, but the felony wouldn't. It's a good deal, Patricia said over the phone. The DA looked at the circumstances. The deliberate exclusion, the locked gate, the documented pattern of neighborhood harassment, and decided this wasn't actually a case worth pursuing aggressively, especially with Derek's situation spiraling. Karen felt something release in her chest. She wasn't out of the woods, but she could see the tree line now. The custody mediation was scheduled for December 2nd. Patricia had warned her that Derek would come armed with character witnesses, with his therapist's letter, with every documented instance of Karen's emotional instability. But what Patricia didn't know was that Karen had been documenting things too. The mediation room was sterile and neutral, designed to make everyone equally uncomfortable. Derek sat across from Karen with his lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Brenda Wolcott who specialized in custody cases. Derek looked thinner, older. There were dark circles under his eyes. Karen recognized the look of a man whose carefully constructed life was collapsing in real time. The mediator, a woman named James Chen, no relation to Officer Chen, reviewed the initial positions. Mr. Patterson is seeking full custody of Sophie, ages 7, citing concerns about Mrs. Patterson's stability and judgment. Mrs. Patterson is seeking primary custody with supervised visitation for the father, pending the outcome of ongoing investigations. Is that correct? Both lawyers nodded. I'd like to start by understanding the current situation, Chen said. Mr. Patterson, can you describe the incident on October 23rd from your perspective? Derek cleared his throat. My wife had been excluded from a neighborhood gathering. She took it personally and drove her car through the fence into the pool area as an act of retaliation. She deliberately endangered the people in that pool, including children. No one was injured? Chen asked. No, but... And you were present at this gathering? Yes, but... And your daughter was not present? Derek's jaw tightened. No, my wife left her at home alone. After how long of being alone? Chen looked at his notes. Approximately 40 minutes. And Mrs. Patterson arranged for childcare? Patricia interjected smoothly. Mrs. Patterson called her sister, Michelle Okonkwo, who was at the home within 20 minutes. There was no actual danger to the child. But she was left alone, Derek repeated. After her father chose to attend a social gathering without her, Patricia countered, while her mother was locked out of that same gathering specifically because the hosts didn't want her family there. Chen held up a hand. Let's take this chronologically. Mr. Patterson, in the weeks leading up to October 23rd, had there been any incidents involving your daughter and neighborhood activities? Derek's lawyer whispered something to him. He shifted uncomfortably. Sophie had been excluded from some neighborhood events, he admitted. How did that make your wife feel? She was upset, and how did it make your daughter feel silence? Your Honor, Patricia said, we have a text message from October 23rd in which Derek told his wife not to wait up because he was having dinner with the guys. The guys were exclusively the husbands from the neighborhood gathering. And we have testimony from a neutral party, Officer Rodriguez, who was present at the police station that day, indicating that Sophie was traumatized by her exclusion from the pool party. Chen turned to Derek. Mr. Patterson, had you been aware of your daughter's emotional state regarding these exclusions? Sophie doesn't usually talk about these things to me. Why is that? Chen asked. Derek didn't answer. Chen made a note. Then he turned to Karen. Mrs. Patterson, can you describe your state of mind on October 23rd? Karen had practiced this with Patricia, but the moment she opened her mouth, she decided to abandon the script. The truth was better. "I was angry," Karen said clearly. "I was angry that my daughter had been deliberately excluded by people in her own neighborhood. I was angry that my husband chose to go to that party without defending us. I was angry that he'd been at work building a narrative about me being unstable, which I had evidence he was doing. And I was angry enough that I got in my car and I drove through a fence. It was deliberate. I calculated the speed to cause property damage without injuring anyone, and I did it anyway because I was done being invisible." Brenda Wolcott pounced. "So you admit to deliberately endangering—" "I admit to deliberately breaking property," Patricia said calmly. "And Mrs. Patterson has already accepted responsibility for that. What she didn't do was endanger anyone." "She traumatized an entire neighborhood," Brenda said. "She revealed an entire neighborhood," Patricia corrected. "And in the process, she revealed your client." Chen looked between them. "What do you mean Patricia pulled out a folder?" "In the 3 weeks since October 23rd, Mr. Patterson's employer has been conducting an investigation into his conduct. He's been accused of sexual harassment by at least 2 colleagues. There are documented emails in which he told people his wife was emotionally abusive and that his marriage was over. He's been taking money from marital assets without informing his wife. He's been researching how to hide assets in a divorce, and he scheduled this custody hearing without actually being present in the home for any extended period. He moved into a hotel the night of the incident." Derek's face had gone pale. His lawyer was making frantic notes. "Furthermore," Patricia continued, "there's no evidence whatsoever that Mrs. Patterson has been neglectful as a parent. Sophie is well-adjusted, well-fed, performing at grade level academically, and living in a stable environment. The only instability in this child's life has been introduced by her father." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Derek. "Mr. Patterson, I'm going to be direct. Your daughter was excluded from a neighborhood event. Your wife was excluded. Your response was to attend the event without them and then tell your wife not to wait up. That's not co-parenting. That's abandonment dressed up as social engagement." Derek's lawyer stood up. "We're not going to sit here and be lectured. Sit down," Chen said mildly. "I'm the mediator. You're here because the court sent you. And right now, I'm listening to a father who's been building a case to take custody of a child he's neglecting, based on the testimony of a therapist who's never actually met this child, while simultaneously having affairs, embezzling from marital assets, and telling everyone at work that his wife is unstable. That's not a custody case. That's a cautionary tale." Chen turned to his notes. "Here's what's going to happen. Primary custody goes to Mrs. Patterson. Mr. Patterson gets supervised visitation 2 weekends per month until a full custody evaluation is completed by a court-appointed psychologist who will speak to the child, the parents, and everyone involved. If Mr. Patterson's employment situation stabilizes and his conduct improves, we can revisit. But right now, supervised visitation is what protects Sophie." "You can't," Derek started. "I just did," Chen said flatly. The rest of the mediation was procedural. Child support calculations, the division of assets, who would pay for Sophie's school supplies, all the administrative details of a marriage dissolving. But the core thing, the thing that mattered, was done. Sophie would stay with Karen. When they walked out of the mediation office, Derek tried to follow Karen to the parking lot, but his lawyer grabbed his arm. Hissing at him about appeal strategies and next steps, Karen kept walking. That evening, she told Sophie the news while they made cookies together, Sophie's favorite after-school ritual. "You're going to keep living with Mommy," Karen said. "And you'll visit Daddy sometimes, but we're going to make sure you're safe and happy when you do." "Is Daddy not good anymore?" Sophie asked, mixing the dough with intense concentration. Karen considered how to answer this. She could protect Derek, could say something vague about grown-ups sometimes making mistakes. Instead, she chose truth. "Your daddy made some bad choices," Karen said. "He chose things that weren't good for you. But that doesn't mean he can't be your daddy. It just means Mommy's going to be the one making the big decisions about your life for now." Sophie nodded as if this made perfect sense. 7-year-old logic was simpler than adult logic. You did good things or you didn't. You chose your family or you didn't. "Good," Sophie said. Because I like living with you more anyway. Karen's heart cracked open. The next week brought an unexpected visitor. Lisa Henderson appeared at Karen's door on a Saturday morning, looking uncomfortable and small in a way Karen had never seen her look. "Can we talk?" Lisa asked. Karen almost said no, but curiosity won out. They sat in Karen's living room, Lisa perched on the edge of the couch like she might contaminate it. "I owe you an apology," Lisa said without preamble. "Multiple apologies, actually. The gate thing, that was deliberate. I was worried about liability if something happened to someone in your family. I was being a coward about it instead of just being honest." "Why are you telling me this now?" Karen asked. "Because my lawyer told me I should, because apparently the way we handled things could constitute intentional infliction of emotional distress, and because—" Lisa trailed off. "Because I've been thinking about what you did, about why you did it, and I realized I would probably do the same thing if someone treated my kid that way." Karen didn't say anything. "I've also been thinking about why I treated you that way," Lisa continued. "And honestly, it was jealousy. You seemed fine with not being part of things. You didn't chase approval the way the rest of us did, and that made you dangerous to our little social ecosystem. So we pushed you out before you could make us feel bad about needing that validation. And now," Karen asked. "Now I realize I don't actually want that validation anymore," Lisa said. "I don't want to be part of a group that gets off on excluding people. And I'm going to formally apologize to you and to Sophie at the next HOA meeting. I'm also going to propose a rule change about community events. No locked gates, everyone invited, no exclusions." Karen stared at her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Lisa added quickly. "I just wanted you to know that you broke something, and I'm grateful you did. I'm grateful you made it impossible to keep pretending everything was fine." After Lisa left, Karen sat in her living room for a long time. She'd started this by breaking a fence, by refusing to be small, by choosing her daughter over politeness. And somehow, in the process, she'd broken something in the neighborhood that needed breaking, the system that ran on exclusion, the rules that kept people out, the careful arrangements that made some people matter more than others. That night, Patricia called with the final news. "The firm is letting Derek go," she said. "They're settling the harassment claims quietly. He's also agreed to pay your legal fees, $23,000, as part of the settlement. And he's agreed to your divorce terms without contesting them." "Why?" Karen asked. "Because he has no leverage left," Patricia said. "He played a game and he lost. When you crashed that car, you changed the entire board. Now everyone's seeing him clearly." Karen hung up and looked at the photos on her mantle. Sophie on the first day of school. Sophie and Karen at the beach. Sophie and Karen in their kitchen, covered in flour from baking. That was her life now. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real, honest, built on truth instead of accommodation. The fence remained destroyed. The pool had been drained and was being rebuilt. But the neighborhood had changed in ways that couldn't be repaired or replicated. And Karen, sitting in her living room surrounded by the wreckage of her old life, finally understood what it meant to be free. She'd lost her marriage, her place in the neighborhood hierarchy, her anonymity. But she'd gained something infinitely more valuable. She'd gained herself back.